Productive Pastor 121, how to have a great weekend off. Welcome back, friends. It's great to be with you. This Productive Pastor, I'm Chad here. It's where we talk about healthy ministry through strategic productivity. And I've got a banger of an episode from the archives of the way back when. This is like true vintage Productive Pastor. I'm thinking this episode came from 2013, so it's over 10 years old. It is one of the original favorites that I had. I've got a list of the old school episodes from that first iteration of the podcast to share when I need a week to kind of focus on some other stuff in order for us to keep the podcast train going. And this is one of those. This is one of those episodes that I found valuable. I actually re-listened to it yesterday on the drive and found it valuable again there. And it helps us think so much about this, this idea of reactivity versus proactivity and responsiveness, but also the idea of what we have to do to keep our energy in tune as ministry leaders. This idea of we have to have resets, we have to have times to just rebuild things. So I'm stoked to have this on here. You can check the show notes out, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/121 for some notes and further thoughts on this. But we're just going to go straight into the episode today. Hope you enjoy this throwback from old school Productive Pastor. The less we cease becoming productive and the more we actually become unproductive. And that there's something about that 40-hour mark that is where we get the most things done. And so these are 6 subtle things. And let me tell you what, they're great. There's some of them that we've heard before. Don't check email first thing in the morning. That's becoming kind of standard, like make a to-do list. But one of the things I love about it is managing mood, starting the day off calm. We're going to talk about that later on in the episode and how some things that I've changed in my own routine that have helped out with that. But this is just a great blog post for all of y'all to read and check out. You can find both these in the show notes at revchadbrooks.com. And with that, we're going to get on to our main conversation today. All right, so this episode of The Productive Pastor, our focus conversation is about how to have a great weekend. Now, you might be wondering, Chad, what's the big deal about that? Great weekends are just when I'm not doing anything. Don't complicate my weekends with your productivity talk. But here's the thing, your weekends matter, and this whole thing started off. In fact, my whole productivity journey started off when I read a book called What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, and it was by Laura Vanderkam. And I started reading everything else she had written, and one of the books that she wrote was What the Most Successful People Do on the Weekend, a short guide to making the most of your days off. And I began thinking about, okay, why does it matter that you plan your time off? And this is actually part of the big news we have later on. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But you've got to plan something for it to matter. And there's also a difference, and this is a little tiny sidebar soapbox for people in ministry. There's a difference between a Sabbath and a day off. Folks that work secular jobs and their day offs, they still got to mow the yard, they got to clean the garage, they got to get stuff done, they got to run errands. Don't expect 2 Sabbaths a week. That's not the way this rolls. There's a such thing as a day off, and there's a such thing as a Sabbath, and you've got to figure out what that means for you. And so I'm going to give you 3 tips to have a great weekend. And before we do that, there's just a little pre-tip, I guess we'll call it that. The tip first. And the first thing is, the first way to have a great weekend is you got to have a great week. If you're hustling on the weekend, you're doing something wrong. That's just not the way this rolls. You can't be like lazy bones all week long and expect to get a great weekend out of it, and defend that time when you didn't get your stuff taken care of for the rest of the week. And so the little pre-tip, have a great week. Hustle on the week, don't hustle on the weekend. And so the first tip to have a great weekend, number 1, find something special. Find something that you only will let yourself do on the weekend. Now, this might be something that it's something you eat or you drink. It might be, I have a friend of mine, he reserved a special kind of coffee for the weekends. He only drinks that kind of coffee. He saves it, so it kind of is part of his Sabbath rhythm. There also might be something like you just can't drive an hour to see a friend to have lunch on a regular day. Like there's something special. That's something you can put into your weekend that you plan for, and you say, you know what, this is something special I can do on this day. And so make sure you plan something special every weekend. You don't just let your weekends drift into the couch and power watching something on Netflix. The second tip to have a great weekend, find something regular. This is something I started years ago, and I know a lot of people that do this, but find a regular thing to do every weekend. It's stated. You know you're going to do this. You know you're going to do this. I have the same thing I do every Friday afternoon. I start my weekend on Friday lunch. On Friday mornings, I do personal works where I prep for Productive Pastor. I write blog posts, that sort of a thing. I start my weekend on Friday at lunch, and I go eat lunch wherever I want to do. And then every Friday afternoon, I spend 2 or 3 hours at one of my favorite local hangouts at a place called Governor's. And I just hang out with my friends there, and I'll smoke a great cigar, and I talk to folks, and that's part of my Friday thing. I do not miss a Friday without doing that. In fact, I'm going to miss next week, and it's the first time in months I've not done that. It's kind of making me mad, but I'm going to be out of town. But find something regular. I got a friend of mine that every Saturday morning he goes to Waffle House and eats the exact same breakfast. It's kind of like this routine he has for the weekend. And the third thing to have a great weekend is this: to find a way to build relationships. You know, if you're just like shutting yourself off all weekend long, you're not going to be refueling some of the desires you have. If you're also shutting your family out of your weekend plans, you're not doing them a service, because that's the whole thing. These days off are these times where you're able to invest in the people that you love and you care the most. And so you need to plan for some relationship thing there. So that's what the whole purpose of planning for a great weekend looks like. You know there's going to be some stuff you have to get done. Like, I got to get the garage clean. But after I get the garage clean, I'm going to go and I'm going to kayak on the bayou. Something you can do here in Monroe. Something I don't do too terribly often because I don't have a kayak. It's something special that I could plan, that I can look forward to all week long. I can look forward to my regular Friday afternoon with my friends at Governor's. I look at the fact that Meredith and I really try, that's my wife, to carve out some distinct time on the weekends for us just to be together and to not be doing something. So intentionally plan out what a perfect weekend would be. I encourage you to just cruise over through the show notes, go to Amazon and pick that book up. It's $2.99. It's not going to be something that is a terrible investment for you, but trust me, it will be worth it. It will make your life better, because there's something about planning out what we want to do, because when we plan it, we make it happen. If you don't plan for something, it never will happen. So that's 3 tips for a great weekend. Find something special, find something regular, and find a way to build relationships. So I realized the last episode, I left out a toolbox tip. Did not share with y'all a toolbox tip, and I was kind of mad at myself because I had a great one. But then I realized it actually might make a little bit more sense on this episode. And so here's the toolbox tip. I'm going to have a moment of confession here that might freak out some of y'all who are not used to conversation with preachers. But I used to have a least favorite day of the week. And it's time for an honesty moment here on the Productive Pastor. My least favorite day of the week, more often than not, was Sunday, because it stressed me out so freaking much that I just did not know how to do. And so I would get up to the church just antsy and wound tight. And this is what I decided to do. I had a favorite routine that what my ideal morning started off like. And my ideal morning for me meant waking up early, taking a shower, spending some time in scripture and the prayer, then driving to Waffle House, eating a 3-egg ham and cheese omelet with bacon and hash browns, and drinking a bunch of water. I know it sounds weird. And then going to Starbucks, getting a cup of coffee, and just going through stuff on the internet and just kind of doing a little bit of light business work, and then getting in to the office. And so I realized that's my ideal beginning to any work day. And Sunday is a work day for people in ministry. So why not do it that way? So now for like the last, maybe let's say 6 weeks, I've been doing that on Sundays, and that combined with a lot of other stuff. I love Sundays now. I also not only to keep up with that whole, the weekend conversation, I only give myself Waffle House on Sundays. And I have a Waffle House like a block away from my house. So it's really hard to do because it's easy and it's quick and it's relatively inexpensive. But like that's my Sunday thing now. So I encourage you to find if there's something, a day that you do not like doing, start it off well. Start off your ideal day. If it might be something that's just a regular routine day that you dread, that stresses you out, or it might just be, you're going to have a doozy of a day, but you have some time early in the morning. Start it off like you would your perfect day, because you will be blown away with how much that adds to your week and how much that adds that day and how much that makes it a lot easier just to be at your best, to be at your tip top in leadership as you go into that. It's just, trust me, totally, totally awesome.
Whenever I go back and I listen to those old episodes, I see and hear so many things. I see and hear about where I was starting off on my own journey to healthy ministry through strategic productivity. I think back to that episode when that was recorded. I was a year or so out of seminary. I was the associate pastor at a mid-sized church. There was all sorts of responsibilities I did not have at that point in time, and there's responsibilities that I had that I no longer have. It's always wild to listen to them. Also, listen, this is a shorter episode because I forgot that back in the early days, I did segments on the podcast. If you like the idea of those segments, we used to talk about articles about productivity or other videos across the internet, that sort of thing. Shout me out, hit me on Twitter or X or whatever you call it this week, or jump in the Productive Pastor community on Facebook and say, hey, Chad, the segment thing sounds a little fun. And we've not done those over the last 121 episodes on this current version of the podcast. So it's there. So you'll be getting this as you hopefully are heading into the weekend. And what I hope is that you think through some of these things we've talked about, some of these, old school tips that I still think are pretty valid. And think about what does it mean for you to plan through to have a good weekend. I love that idea of a good weekend is not an unplanned weekend. And a lot of times a good weekend has some plans attached to it. And as I think through my own life, I've realized lately my time off has not been planned at all. And maybe that's one reason why my time off has not been as good of a time off as it could have been. But yeah, that's it. So I encourage you, hit the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/121. Sign up for the Productive Pastor emails. I do these weekly as a deep dive into very specific parts of ministry productivity. We've got a monthly focus, and each week we kind of pick apart a different segment of that. You can also come and hang out at the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. Over 1,000 pastors are gathered there to talk about, finding healthy ministry through strategic productivity. But as always, it's an honor to host, to steward this thing called Productive Pastor in all of the varieties of ways that has expressed itself now for over 10 years. Now, that's kind of wild. If this was a kid, they'd be in 5th grade. They'd be doing stuff. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode. I'm Chad, and I will see you back on our next episode of Productive Pastor.